96 kilometers from the Saudi capital of Riyadh, the unthinkable has just occurred. The United States military's presumed impenetrable fortress in the region, Prince Sultan Air Base, has suffered a catastrophic tactical breach. Let me be clear, there is no longer any safe zone in the Persian Gulf. According to raw dispatch data directly verified by AP News over the last 48 hours, a highly coordinated multi-vector kinetic strike completely overwhelmed the base's multi-layered defense grid. OSINT analysts and on-the-ground reporting confirm a synchronized swarm consisting of exactly 29 tactical UAVs and 6 heavy payload ballistic missiles. They did not just target the outer perimeter, they pierced directly through the defensive umbrella, exposing a terrifying blind spot in the U.S. early warning radar and interception architecture. The operational fallout is severe and meticulously documented. AP News corroborates that 15 U.S. troops sustained immediate casualties during the payload deliveries, with 5 personnel categorized as critical, requiring emergency medical extraction from the impact zones. This latest theater-level escalation brings the total number of U.S. service members wounded in this widening strategic confrontation to over 300, with at least 13 personnel officially confirmed by major defense correspondents as taken off the board. But the real shockwave echoing through the Pentagon isn't just the casualty metric, it is the technological implication. Prince Sultan Air Base houses critical U.S. fighter squadrons and advanced interceptor batteries. It is the nerve center for regional deterrence. For a mixed munitions swarm to successfully navigate the airspace and achieve direct impact means the adversary has successfully mapped the tracking vulnerabilities of American air defense systems. This is a textbook asymmetric engagement, where a localized force successfully bypassed billions of dollars in advanced radar technology. The deterrence paradigm has experienced a total structural collapse. Washington's primary shield in the Middle East has been fractured. But to understand exactly how this defensive blind spot was exploited and why the base was targeted with such precise kinetic force right now, we have to rewind exactly 24 hours. Because before the ballistic missiles were launched, a critical diplomatic mechanism was violently dismantled. Exactly 1 day before the airspace over Riyadh was saturated with inbound munitions, the final geopolitical off-ramp collapsed. As detailed in breaking situational reports from AP News, a high-stakes back-channel negotiation ended in an absolute diplomatic rupture. The designated U.S. presidential envoy, Steve Witkoff, had arrived with what was internally classified as a final-stage strategic containment protocol. It was a comprehensive 15-point action list delivered directly to Tehran's intermediaries. This was not merely a ceasefire proposal. It was a rigid framework designed to forcefully de-escalate the theater and restore Western maritime dominance. The demands were uncompromising: an immediate cessation of all proxy kinetic engagements, a total reopening of the critical transit corridors in the Strait of Hormuz, and a strict, verifiable rollback of all high-level nuclear enrichment activities. Washington was attempting to reassert its deterrence posture through direct diplomatic coercion. But the authority bias of the global superpower met an immovable wall. AP News confirms that Tehran did not simply reject the 15-point framework. They practically shredded it on contact. In a stunning geopolitical power reversal that has sent shockwaves through the State Department, the Iranian delegation countered with their own aggressive 5-point ultimatum. They did not sue for peace, they dictated terms. The specifics of this counterproposal are chilling for Western defense planners. Tehran's 5-point list demanded massive economic reparations, but the true red line was their final demand: absolute recognition of Iranian sovereignty and control over the Strait of Hormuz. Understand the gravity of this geopolitical chokehold. The Strait of Hormuz is the central artery of global energy transit. By demanding recognized sovereignty over this waterway, Tehran was effectively claiming the power to legally blockade a massive percentage of the world's oil supply. It was a direct challenge to the United States Navy's freedom of navigation mandate. When Witkoff's mission failed, the intelligence community knew an immediate theater-level escalation was inevitable. The shredding of the 15-point action list was not just a breakdown in talks, it was the firing of the starter pistol for the next phase of the conflict. The multi-vector swarm that penetrated the Prince Sultan Air Base mere hours later was the direct physical manifestation of Tehran's refusal to yield. However, this diplomatic collapse and the subsequent strike on the U.S. base did not happen in a vacuum. To understand why Tehran felt emboldened to launch a preemptive swarm on an American installation, we have to look at the catastrophic intelligence failure that occurred simultaneously on the Israeli front. The ultimate red line had just been crossed in the shadows. While Washington was attempting to salvage the geopolitical architecture via diplomatic channels, a completely separate unilateral theater-level operation was being executed in the shadows. To understand the fury of the swarm that struck the Prince Sultan base, we must look at the exact catalyst. 48 hours prior, the ultimate red line in the Middle East was crossed. Israel executed a decapitation strike against the very heart of Iran's nuclear infrastructure. According to simultaneous groundbreaking reports verified by AP News and subsequently corroborated by IRNA, the official state media apparatus of the Islamic Republic, the Israeli Air Force bypassed all ongoing U.S.-led negotiations and launched a highly classified kinetic bombardment. They did not target proxy outposts. They went straight for the apex of Tehran's strategic deterrence. The tactical details emerging from intelligence circles describe a surgical payload delivery system designed for maximum structural collapse with zero radiological dispersal. The primary target was the Shahid Khandab heavy water complex, located deep within Iraq. For military analysts, Iraq is the nightmare scenario. Heavy water facilities are the critical, shadow pathway to extracting weapons-grade plutonium. Taking this node off the board effectively paralyzes the secondary route to a nuclear deterrent. But the operation did not stop there. The secondary kinetic strike hit the Artican yellowcake production plant situated in Yazd province. Yellowcake, milled uranium oxide, is the foundational precursor required for the entire enrichment supply chain. According to the statements from the Israeli military, obtained and published by AP News, the raw materials actively being processed for high-level enrichment at the Yazd plant were completely neutralized. The Israeli defense establishment categorized the preemptive strike as a major blow to the covert nuclear program, setting their capabilities back by years. This was a masterclass in asymmetrical penetration. To reach Iraq and Yazd, strike packages had to navigate some of the most heavily fortified, multi-layered airspace in the world, utilizing advanced electronic warfare to blind early warning radar arrays before delivering deep-penetrating bunker munitions. Crucially, both AP News and Iran's Atomic Energy Organization confirmed that while the industrial infrastructure suffered catastrophic structural collapse, there was no radiation leak. This indicates a terrifying level of precision. The munitions were engineered to collapse the processing equipment and subterranean chambers without breaching the core containment vessels, thereby avoiding a global radiological incident while still achieving total operational paralysis. This unilateral strike shattered the established rules of engagement. By ignoring Washington's push for a 15-point diplomatic resolution and opting for a kinetic solution, Israel forced Tehran into an impossible corner. A nuclear program that took decades to build was systematically dismantled in a matter of hours. This is the missing puzzle piece. This is exactly why the Iranian delegation shredded the American envoy's ultimatum. In the eyes of Tehran, Washington's diplomatic mission was merely a smokescreen to buy time for the Israeli kinetic strike. The subsequent ballistic swarm launched at the U.S. Prince Sultan Air Base was not an isolated act of aggression. It was a desperate, calculated retaliation. By striking the American defense umbrella, Tehran was sending a lethal message. If our sovereign infrastructure is taken off the board, your forward operating bases will share the exact same fate. But a superpower cannot absorb a direct hit to its regional command centers without a response. And as the U.S. base in Saudi Arabia burned, Tehran activated its most unpredictable proxy to open a terrifying second front, stretching the entire Allied defense grid to its absolute breaking point. The bombardment of Prince Sultan Air Base was not an isolated retaliatory strike. It was merely the opening salvo of a synchronized multi-theater offensive. As American medical personnel were extracting casualties in Saudi Arabia, the second phase of Tehran's grand strategy was activated 1,000 miles to the south. The domino effect had begun, and the axis of the conflict fundamentally shifted. For months, global defense analysts believed the Houthi forces in Yemen were strictly relegated to asymmetrical maritime harassment, disrupting commercial shipping lanes in the Red Sea. But following the Israeli decapitation strike on Iran's heavy water core, the proxy's operational mandate was instantly upgraded. They pivoted from a maritime nuisance to a direct existential strategic threat. According to synchronized intelligence briefs verified by Reuters, The Guardian, and the Times of India over the last 48 hours, the Iran-aligned Houthi forces officially opened a terrifying second front. The global intelligence community watched in real time as the Houthis executed a massive two-wave kinetic bombardment targeting Israeli sovereign territory in less than 24 hours. This was not a localized border skirmish. This was a long-range, multi-vector swarm designed to shatter the illusion of a secure home front. The primary vectors for this ballistic swarm were the critical southern port sector of Eilat and the highly classified, sensitive military installations scattered across the Negev desert. To breach the airspace, the Houthis did not rely on a single munition type. Military intelligence indicates a complex layering of low-altitude cruise missiles designed to hug the terrain and evade early warning radar, paired with high-trajectory ballistic missiles dropping at terminal velocity, all screened by a vanguard of loitering tactical UAVs. The tactical objective here is chilling in its calculation. The goal was not merely payload delivery, it was artificial saturation. They intended to completely overwhelm the world's most advanced, multi-tiered air and missile defense grid. While the Iron Dome system is globally renowned, it is primarily engineered for localized, short-range rocket interception. To counter the exo-atmospheric ballistic threats originating from the Arabian Peninsula, the Israeli Defense Forces were forced to activate their upper-tier strategic interceptors, the Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 defense systems. When an adversary forces a nation to burn through highly sophisticated, multi-million-dollar Arrow interceptors to neutralize relatively inexpensive proxy munitions, they are executing a devastating campaign of economic and attritional warfare. This is the definition of stretching a defense grid to its absolute breaking point. The public statements released by the proxy forces, heavily documented by Reuters and The Guardian, leave no room for diplomatic interpretation. They explicitly confirmed the targeting of sensitive military areas and vowed to sustain these theater-level military operations in the coming days. By opening this southern corridor of bombardment, they are actively siphoning Israeli defensive resources away from the primary northern and eastern threat vectors, effectively bleeding the Allied deterrence capabilities dry. Israel is now locked into a high-intensity, multi-front strategic confrontation. Their nuclear gamble in Iraq successfully neutralized Tehran's immediate enrichment capabilities, but the blowback has ignited the entire region. With U.S. forces sustaining casualties in the Gulf and Israeli airspace facing relentless ballistic saturation from Yemen, the Allied security architecture is fundamentally cracking. Faced with the imminent collapse of regional stability and the direct targeting of American personnel, Washington has realized that proxy containment has failed. The Pentagon has officially pulled the emergency cord, triggering a deployment scale not seen since the dawn of the century. The red lines have been shattered, the diplomatic channels are definitively closed, and American forward operating bases are actively taking direct kinetic hits. The Pentagon has officially run out of asymmetric containment options. In the last 24 hours, the United States Central Command, or CENTCOM, has initiated a terrifying theater-wide operational shift. We are no longer looking at a proxy engagement. We are witnessing the preparatory phase of a massive direct ground confrontation. According to breaking dispatches verified by AP News, the Department of Defense is scrambling the largest U.S. military buildup in the Middle East in more than 2 decades. The sheer scale and speed of this mobilization indicate that Washington believes a full-scale regional collapse is no longer a strategic possibility, but an imminent tactical certainty. Intelligence sources and AP News confirm that a rapid deployment force of approximately 2,500 U.S. Marines has already made landfall in the region. These are not advisory units or logistical support. These are heavily armed amphibious assault elements and expeditionary strike groups. Their operational mandate is clear. They are positioned to physically secure and lock down the choke points of the Strait of Hormuz, acting as a direct kinetic countermeasure to the exact 5-point ultimatum Tehran delivered just days prior. But the naval deployment is only the first phase of this massive military mobilization. The truly chilling escalation comes directly from the skies. AP News, corroborating official CENTCOM data, has confirmed the emergency deployment of at least 1,000 elite paratroopers from the legendary 82nd Airborne Division. Military analysts understand the gravity of this specific unit. You do not deploy the 82nd Airborne for diplomatic leverage or routine deterrence. These are highly specialized, rapid insertion infantrymen, explicitly trained to parachute into deeply hostile, heavily contested territory. Their primary mission profile is to establish a violent perimeter, forcibly secure key strategic nodes, and retake compromised airfields under heavy enemy fire. Their deployment profile tells us exactly what the Pentagon is preparing for. Following the devastating ballistic and UAV swarm attack that exposed the critical blind spot at Prince Sultan Air Base, CENTCOM realizes their existing regional infrastructure is utterly vulnerable to further neutralization. The 82nd Airborne is being injected into the theater to physically reinforce these targeted defensive grids and act as an immediate reaction force against any further sovereign incursions. This massive injection of elite combat personnel fundamentally alters the strategic calculus of the entire Persian Gulf. The United States has formally placed its most lethal rapid response units squarely on the geopolitical chessboard. We are now looking at thousands of highly trained American personnel staring directly across the tactical battle space at an adversary that just proved it can successfully breach a U.S. air defense umbrella. All the pieces are locked into their final positions. The heavy water nuclear core at Iraq has been neutralized, but the tactical blowback has ignited a multi-front firestorm. The Strait of Hormuz is officially a geopolitical powder keg, and thousands of U.S. combat troops are now deployed on a razor's edge, waiting for the inevitable spark. The next major kinetic launch will not just hit an isolated airfield, it will ignite a theater-level global conflict. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel and have your notification bell turned on. Because when the first shots of this ground engagement are officially fired and the defense grids light up again, we will be bringing you the unclassified raw OSINT breakdown immediately. Until then, stay vigilant.